Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius encouraged people to not waste energy by fighting against society. And he called that going with the flow. But now, going with the flow has come to mean having a relaxed attitude, letting life carry you along. After all, what you resist persists, right? As Jung said. Now, I've been described many times as someone who goes with the flow, easygoing, keeping my neutrality in conflict, although not all the time. You might have heard me get a little rattled as I was doing this directing for the first time in a while. And yet, well, I'll get to that in a minute, how I got out of it, how I got through that. But I have found that going with the flow sometimes, because I know other people who work that way in their lives, I have found that someone who goes with the flow sometimes, it could lead to laziness in their life. It could lead to playing spiritual bypass kind of games, or having a reluctance to taking life seriously, or taking it deeply, or grabbing it by the collar sometimes if it's necessary. Today I want to talk about the power and the depth in going with the flow in a spiritually conscious and mindful way. By going with the flow on the river of the divine you, the divine me. Lao Tzu wrote, "Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like." Now, going with the flow doesn't really have to be like a cop-out, like I was telling you that tends to happen to some people who go with the flow. It doesn't have to be a cop-out. You don't have to accept life's lemons as the end of the story. You and I create the flow. You and I create the story. And the best way to do that is by getting in the flow on the river of love and law. Now, of course, it may not all be peaches and cream. It may involve some tough relaxing into the chaos, and sometimes it's tough to relax into the chaos. And sometimes we have to learn not to stress, and we have to learn the difference between responding versus reacting. But the main action behind going with the flow is not just laying back. It's taking hold of the consciousness cord, you may call it, that connects us to the power of manifestation, where we can get guidance, where wisdom lies, where the love of the universe sits and waits. We cannot practice the love of life in isolation or in a vacuum. Every spiritual path and all the mystics that I've read, at least, have described that each of us in nature is connected to that single divine river where the wellspring of infinite possibilities flows. In the Science of Mind book, Ernest Holmes wrote, "Within this infinite mind, each individual exists. We are not separated from life, neither is it separated from us, but we are separate entities in it, individualized centers of God consciousness." I've said something like that pretty much every week. We are individualized expressions of the divine. And that includes all the wisdom there is in the universe, in time, ancient through modern, through stuff that might have been unknown even, and just showed up for you because you tapped into it. When we awaken to the truth, we become open to the impulse and guidance of spirit. We become inspired by imagination. imagination and wisdom, where we become directed by our values and ethics. We become committed to our core principles and dedicated then to the transformation and transcendence, no matter the circumstances that are showing up. This gentleman named Leo Babauta, and he has a blog called Zen Habits, and he wrote this: no matter how much structure we create in our lives, no matter how many good habits we build, there will always be things that we cannot control. And if we let them, these things can be a huge source of anger, frustration, and stress. We have to remember that this conflict or condition that shows up has already happened. Once we've experienced it, it's already happened. We can't go back and make it not have happened, at least not yet. So what do we do when we step in it, so to speak? When junk shows up in our lives, whether it's big or small. You know, I had a kidney stone journey, and I believe it was 2013. And it was 4 days of cramps and 4 days of feeling like I was Sisyphus going up the hill, rolling that boulder up the hill, although the boulder was in my kidney, evidently. And I was invoking powerful names, Yeshua, Iron Man, whoever came to my head, Captain Kirk, you know, and I was trying to be the ideas of those people. And I was saying phrases I cannot repeat here on this celebration. And I was jumping up and down to try to rattle the stone around and break it up. And then I noticed the usual flow, go with the flow idea was kind of going right out of my mind. As easily as the cursing came out of my mouth for 4 days. But then, and I don't remember which day it happened, could have been the second or third day, could have been the fourth day, but I started to become focused on not resolving the pain, and the pain pills didn't work, so I didn't even take those, but remembering who I was. Yeah, I had plenty of moments of health worries, possible financial concerns, the agonizing pain, of course, but it was my consciousness work that really brought the relief. This gentleman named Kamal Ravikant, he's written a lot of books, and he wrote this. He said, most of our pain, most of our suffering comes from resistance to what life is. And when we resist what life is, we suffer. When you can say yes to life, surrender to life and say, okay, what should I be now? That's where the power comes from. I want to tell you a story about a young martial arts student who was under the tutelage of a famous master. And one day the master was watching his student practice in the courtyard, and he realized that the presence of the other students was interfering with the young man's attempts to perfect his technique. And so the master, of course, could sense the young man's frustration, and he went up to the student and he tapped him on his shoulder, and he said, "So what's the problem?" "Well, I don't know," said the youth, and he had a strained expression on his face. "No matter how much I try, I am unable to execute the moves properly." "Well, what's the problem?" "I don't know. I just don't know." The teacher looked at him and he said, "Well, before you can master technique, you must master and understand harmony, my son. Master the idea of harmony. Come with me. I will explain." And so the teacher and the student, they left the building and they walked some distance into the woods until they came upon a stream. And the master stood silently on the bank, and after several moments, he said, "Look at the stream, my son. There are rocks in its way. Does it slam into them out of frustration? Watch it. Watch the water. Watch it simply flow over and around them and then move on. My son, to understand harmony, to master the moves when chaos is around you, be like the water, and you will know what harmony is. Whether it's COVID or a broken pipe, don't dig into your heels and push and shove and struggle until the veins pop out of your head. Stop saying no to life, even if it's something negative showing up. Say yes and accept whatever it is. Now, the act of accepting doesn't mean giving permission. Okay? It doesn't mean you're letting life, you're just sitting back and just letting life come at you. Accepting lets us stop thinking that we must swim upstream or wish we could go back in time somehow. Accepting allows us to reach out and turn that dial so that we can tune into and allow the nourishing flow of the river of divine intelligence to carry us over and around the rocks that may show up in front of us. I want to quickly go through a few daily practice tips that I saw in an article by Bev Janish, and she wrote several of them, and I just picked up 3 of them that I thought might be great tools for us to remember. Number 1, learn to distinguish between thoughts and feelings that arise from the condition or the event. Distinguish those thoughts and those feelings from the higher you or the small you that is just experiencing. Decide, is it bringing your small self, these thoughts and feelings, is it bringing your small self or your highest self? And then ask yourself, what is in my heart's desire right now? What inspired action arising from my soul am I meant to take today at this moment in this situation? And number 3, of course, create a daily habit of communicating with Source through meditation, prayer, or what she calls, and I love this, and I'm going to start using it, divine chats. She follows with saying, going with the flow is about creating awareness, space, and practices that enable us to tune into what divine wisdom is intuiting and then honoring what we hear. So I want to ask you today to join me. I want to invite you to join me into stepping into harmony, to committing to practicing in the awakening of your spiritual magnificence and personal power that is there right now, no matter what's coming at you, to commit to catching the spark of divine ideas. And you may be in pain or in fear or some prognosis or consequences is seemingly taking over your mind, overwhelming your life. Or you may be uncomfortable with the idea of making changes in your habits of thought and or action. What's going on may be messy, chaotic, sad, or dirty, but as we understand that any yuckiness that shows up, it's the perfect outcome of the flow of the river of life that we've decided to float upon. And so we welcome to becoming open to and ready for the ideas, practices, and solutions to incorporate into our boat. Because going with the flow doesn't mean you just sit there and hope that you become dislodged from this condition, this situation. By going with the flow and using your spiritual tools, you'll rise up from the hurricane of discomfort. So go ahead. Like I told you before, go ahead. Rage and weep for a few minutes. And take a breath. And after you take that breath, you will feel just a teeniest, maybe maybe the teeniest bit of harmony, maybe the teeniest bit of centeredness and groundness. That's enough. That's enough for you to tap into the river of divine wisdom and allow your intuition to inform you of your options, not your fear, not your discomfort, not your overwhelmedness. Tap into the river of divine wisdom. Allow your intuition to inform you of your options and find your best practices from a place of yes and acceptance. Okay, it's here. I get it. Universe, I'm open, I'm ready. Reveal it to me. See, there's really beauty in everything around us. If we look at it as perfect, if we go with the flow of our lives, go with the flow of our communities, go with the flow of our health, go with the flow at this time of COVID and lockdown, go with the flow of our relationships, no matter what they are. It doesn't mean you don't take action when you go with the flow. It means you go with the flow on the river of divine intelligence and love, to take action with the wisdom of the ages, the power of the mighty Mississippi flowing through you, with you, for you, as you, and tapping into receiving and then stepping into taking the best advice available from the universe and its creations and putting it into practice. Flow in the river of divine love and law and wisdom, and watch yourself move forward with ease.